Buildings are actually important. For many, perhaps most people, a building is their single biggest investment and or expense, and they frequently spend considerable amounts in making their homes conform to their wants and needs. Many of us spend significant amounts of money to go and visit wonderful buildings and urban environment in Europe and other places. Importantly, buildings and streetscapes define our cities. I call this notion the face of the city. Imagine you're looking for a city in which to locate your company's proposed new branch office. Someplace where you, your spouse, your children, and employees would like to live. That means attractive dwellings in pleasant neighborhoods, great schools, cultural and recreational facilities, and attractive shopping opportunities. And all those things relate to buildings. I'm Dr. Ian Ellingham, and as an architect and land economist, I've had a long-term interest in questions about buildings and how they relate to people. As well as managing the development of quite a few buildings of different types, I've been active in research, teaching, and writing. I've had three main research interests. One, about forms of tenure, and about decision making, and about the human response to the built environment. Now, we all have opinions about the buildings we encounter, quite apart from their functionality. Sir Henry Wotton, MP, who lived from 1568 to 1639, offered opinion about what makes a good building, based on the writings of the 1st century Roman builder we usually just call Vitruvius. He said, "Well building hath three conditions: firmness, commodity, and delight." Rephrasing yet again for our times, a successful building will not collapse and will survive the elements, will be useful, presumably for the purposes for which it was intended, and the design will please someone, probably the individuals to whom it's directed, and obviously necessarily done, in our times, responsibly with respect to the resources expended to create and operate it. In the 21st century, firmness and commodity are usually acceptable and just taken for granted, at least in new buildings, partly as a result of regulation. But delight remains all too often unaddressed. This is strange because we worry about visual design relative to so many other products. Yes, design preference is a personal matter, but have you ever wondered why you hold those opinions, the opinions that you hold, and what it is about the visual aspects of a building or space make you esteem or dislike it? Or what patterns exist in the way people respond? I certainly have. Through my career, I've kept asking questions about what factors lead to people generally coming to esteem a building. I've often been disappointed to find few answers. After all, visual design is important relative to those many other products. Architecture is indeed unique among human-made products for a number of reasons, one of which is that it lasts longer, so is likely to be exposed to successive generations. But in many ways, it's still a consumer good, and in a time when sustainability is important, we should not be using resources to create buildings that most people find unappealing or even repellent. Why spend money on some feature that does not enhance the building in some way and may actually detract from its economic, social, or environmental worth? There have been many efforts to seek explanations for human preferences and identify patterns. And there's abundant insightful research usually conducted by university-based psychologists, and more recently by neuroscientists from around the world who've looked at this matter. Unfortunately, little of it leaves academia and reaches the wider population, or even the people who create and manage buildings or urban environments. Many of those people are unaware that this body of knowledge even exists. This is a problem that needs to be dealt with. There are reasons why things have evolved this way. The great 17th century scientist, Christopher Wren, did muse on whether beauty in buildings was somehow inherent in the characteristics of the building, or whether it was more related to the person. Wren, should he have decided to pursue the matter experimentally, would have faced numbers of difficulties. The theories of modern psychology or market research did not exist, nor did the mathematical and statistical methods that are so useful in understanding results. Not to mention the computers we now use to grind up piles of data. The notion of going out and surveying the wider population would have been seen as most curious in a pre-consumer society, when most people were merely struggling to survive. Buildings were built by and for a narrow slice of society. There have been numbers of resulting implications, including that design philosophies were developed based on logic and rhetoric, not evidence, as well as the preferences of an aristocratic elite. And this continued into the 20th century, where an educated intellectual elite looked to building and urban design to solve social problems that resulted from industrial revolutions and urbanization. Things are different now, and in much of the world, we inhabit societies in which most people are educated, can aspire to more than basic survival, and have opinions. That factor of delight is more important to more people. We also now have evidence about how people evaluate buildings and what aspects of buildings and other environment make people tend to have positive responses. Do you personally align with the patterns that prevail among the wider population? Well, perhaps not, but that does not mean that patterns do not exist, or that in today's consumer-oriented societies they are somehow wrong. All of this means there's considerable scope for design and design processes to move towards becoming more evidence-based. Most products we use have been designed with the user's preferences in mind. Think about when you purchase something, either in a shop or online. Your first assessment is usually visual, and your response will determine your next step. Whether you look for more information about it, click Add to Cart, or look for something else sold by another company. With capable consumers, and when product safety and functionality is increasingly assured by government and the marketplace, the visual image of a product is more important. The marketing people know this and spend considerable sums to understand those market responses and design accordingly. Over a couple of decades, as well as actually building some things, I have worked through some of the issues. I've reviewed hundreds of papers dealing with other people's experiments and conducted some of my own. This has resulted in a book called Understanding Ugly. And it's written so as to fascinate the general reader, as well as inform the practitioner. And it's a glimpse into an intriguing aspect of the world we inhabit. To me, this is an exciting field, with research findings suggesting we move to a more evidence-based approach to how we create our buildings and cities. We know many things about the subjective interaction between humans and buildings, and how individual buildings should respond to their individual contexts. And all of that implies a continual increase in our understanding of human response. Now, this has been the first of a series of talks about the visual aspects of buildings and the need for developers, architects, managers, and regulators to become more focused on the preferences and the expectations of an increasingly affluent and capable population. This is not easy, because people are complex entities. But that makes it all the more interesting.